Hello boys and girls, it's Mrs. Unfried here again. I am going to be reading you another story today. Today I'm in a different room in my house. I'm in my living room, as you can see. So since the story we listened to on Storyline this week was Carla's Sandwich, I thought that it would be fun to read another book kind of about food that's kind of silly. So this is a book that I remember really enjoying when I was in about 2nd or 3rd grade and I first discovered it. So I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I did. This book is called Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. I'll read what's on the back of the story to give you a little bit of an idea of what it's about. If food dropped like rain from the sky, wouldn't it be marvelous? Or would it? It could, after all, be messy, and you'd have no choice what you would eat. What if you didn't like what fell? Or what if too much came? Have you ever thought of what it might be like to be squashed flat by a pancake? Just some food for thought there for you. So this is a little bit of a longer book. So what I'm going to try doing today is holding up the book and reading it kind of like I do in the classroom. And when I finish reading a page, I will hold it up closer to the camera so you can see the pictures a little bit better. So here we go. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. This book was written by Judi Barrett. So Judi Barrett is the author, and it was illustrated by Ron Barrett. So Ron Barrett drew the pictures in this book. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for orange juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could each eat, and Grandpa was doing the flipping. Seconds later, something flew through the air, headed towards the kitchen ceiling. What might that have been? And landed right on Henry. After we realized that the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully. All the other pancakes landed in the pan, and all of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best all-tall-tale bedtime story he'd ever heard. Across an ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 smaller ocean, there lie the tiny town of Chew and Swallow. In most ways, it was very much like any other tiny town. It had a main street lined with stores, houses with trees and garden around them, a schoolhouse, about 300 people, and some assorted cats and dogs. But there were no food stores in the town of Chew and Swallow. They didn't need any. The sky supplied all the food they could possibly want. The only thing that was really different about Chew and Swallow was the weather. It came 3 times a day. What 3 times a day do you think that was? It was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything that everyone ate came from the sky. Whatever the weather served was what they ate. It never rained rain, it never snowed snow, and it never blew just wind. It rained things like soup and juice. It snowed mashed potatoes and green beans. And sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. Could you imagine what that would be like if the weather was food? The people could watch the weather report on television the next morning, and they would even hear a prediction for the next day's food. So instead of listening to the weather would tell them what kind of food the sky was going to give them that day. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, forks, and spoons, knives, and napkins with them. That way they would always be prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, the people took them home and put them in their refrigerators in case they got hungry in between meals. The menu varied, meaning it was different every day. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny-side-up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast. Butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast, and most of the time it rained milk afterwards. For lunch one day, frankfurters, or hot dogs, already in their buns, blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds nearby. Then the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. So what I think is really funny about this picture is it's a restaurant, and it's called Ralph's Roofless Restaurant. How come they don't need a roof on the restaurant? Right, because the food comes down from the sky. Would they have any cooks at this restaurant? Nope, they wouldn't, because their food, once again, all comes down from the sky, so they don't need people to cook their food. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by gradual clearing, with a wonderful jello setting in the west. So instead of a sunset, there's a nice pretty jello. And since it's been beautiful and sunny outside, we've had some really nice sunsets recently. I hope you guys have been able to see those. The sanitation department, the cleaning department of Chew and Swallow, had a rather unusual job for a sanitation department. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and sidewalks and lawns, people's yards. The workers cleaned things up after every meal and fed all the dogs and cats. Then they emptied some of it into the surrounding oceans for the fish and turtles and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so that the soil would be richer for people's flower gardens. So they used the food to help people's flowers grow. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. They had a really bad storm of spaghetti one day. Look at all that spaghetti. One day there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day long. That's a type of cheese that's smelly. So when you look a little closer at this picture, you'll see the people have clothespins on their noses because they don't want to smell the cheese. The next day, there was only broccoli, all overcooked. And the next day, there were Brussels sprouts and peanut butter with mayonnaise. Another day, there was pea soup fog. No one could see where they were going, and they could barely find the rest of the meal that got stuck in the fog. So if you thought that it was crazy that the weather made food, the weather's really doing some crazy things now, isn't it? The food was getting larger and larger and so were the portions. Portions are the size of a meal. The people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently. Awful things were happening. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day long and into the night. There were soft rolls and hard rolls, some with seeds and some without. There was white bread and rye and whole wheat toast. Most of it was larger than they had ever seen bread and rolls before. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged, and the sanitation department was beside itself. The mess took the workers 4 days to clean up, and the sea was full of floating rolls. To help out, the people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards. The birds picked at it a bit, but it just stayed there and got staler and staler. So there was way too much bread. Not all the people could eat all of the bread. There was a storm of pancakes one morning and a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off because of its weight, so they had to close the school. Lunch one day brought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick, and the day ended with a stomach ache. Probably because cream cheese and jelly sandwiches would not taste that good, or maybe they were too sweet. There was an awful salt and pepper wind, accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly and running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp everywhere. The sanitation department gave up. The job was too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many houses had been badly damaged by giant meatballs. Stores were boarded up, and there was no more school for the children. So a decision was made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. It was a matter of survival. So abandon means that they're going to leave. So they're going to leave the town. Let's see where they leave the town and go to. The people glued together the giant pieces of stale bread, sandwich style, with peanut butter. A very clever way to make a boat. Took the absolute necessities with them and set sail on their rafts for a new land. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well enough for them to build temporary homes for themselves out of it. The children began school again, and the adults all tried to find places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change they had to make was getting used to buying food at the supermarket. They found it odd that the food was kept on shelves, packaged in boxes, cans, and bottles. Meat that had to be cooked was kept in large refrigerators. Nothing came from the sky except for rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs. No one ever got hit by a hamburger again. And nobody dared to go back to Chew and Swallow to find out what had happened to it. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remember his goodnight kiss. The next morning, we woke up to see snow falling outside our window. We ran downstairs for breakfast and ate it a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. It's funny, but even as we were sliding down the hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter at the top, and we could almost smell the mashed potatoes. And that is the end. I hope you boys and girls enjoyed that story. So don't forget, now that you've heard this story, on one of your pieces of lined paper, you get to draw a picture and write a sentence about what kind of food you would want to come from the sky and why. So if Mrs. Unfried could choose a food to come from the sky right now, it would probably be macaroni and cheese, because that is one of my favorite foods to eat right now, and it's also something that the baby is making me want. So anyways, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed that story, and I will see you next time. Bye!